All right.
Oh, what's in it?
All right. So tonight we are here to talk about our English language development programs and some lessons learned from the field, from the classroom, from the school. I recognize some names and faces, but I see lots of new names and faces, which is nice too. So I will introduce myself as well. I'm Kelly Ryder. I'm the founder of English Learner Portal. And I appreciate you taking some time tonight to hang out with me and hear about what's been happening here with English Learner Portal and some ideas for you. I have been working in English Learner Portal, created English Learner Portal in 2018 after 25 years in schools. And this year felt like I needed to reconnect. And so this year I am back also working part-time in a school as an ELD teacher while also working English Learner Portal. So I feel that with having a semester down now back in school, many things haven't changed, but many things have changed along the way. So just know that the information I'm sharing tonight is based on real life in the classroom. Right? So we're going to talk about some of the challenges and some possible solutions as well. At any time, feel free to use the chat to ask a question. I'll try to keep an eye there um, while I'm talking and every so often take a peek to make sure that I'm catching any questions that come up. Feel free to comment, feel free to um, share a resource, to make add to the conversation, right? Open chat for you. All right, so you're going to get some value today. If you're an ELD teacher struggling to find your place in changing curriculum, there's a lot of that going on across the states. So if in the chat, if you would like, if this resonates with you, you could say that's me or yes. So I know your situation as well. Um, you may be a program or school leader and you're trying to figure out how to support your ELD program, your ELD team, your teachers, and what is the right thing to do. There's so many different things that we could be doing. What is the most effective and what is the right way to go? And also, if you're a content teacher and you're interested in knowing more about language development, so you can grow your expertise and be a stronger support for your students as well. So that is who we're talking to tonight. So hopefully that one of those or more than one of those applies to you. All right. The ideas that I'm talking about with you tonight are based on years of experience, but also based on research. I won't spend a lot of time going into the specifics of who and what report and which researcher tonight because this is a quick overview. But if you are interested in that information and you're that person who loves to read research and wants to dig in deeper, just let me know and I'd be happy to share those resources with you as well. I am going to start right out. You have my email if you're here. And that is the email that I check all day, every day, and respond to, but I'll put it here in the chat as well. If you are interested in getting more about the research side of it, feel free to email me and we'll be happy to share those things with you. And I will be talking about some of the things that we've been doing in districts as well. So I'd like to hear from you first in the chat. What's keeping your ELD program from being the most highly effective program you imagine for your students? What barriers are you facing? What challenges? And I love that we have a good scattering across the United States here so we can see the similarities we have regardless of where we are living and working. Um, so let's check and see what are the struggles? What are the challenges? Helping students understand content material versus helping them make progress in English. Excellent, right? It's that tug of war where they need to learn this and they need to learn this content, but without the language, it's really hard to learn the content. So, no matter what you're doing, you feel like there's something else you should be doing. Staffing, scheduling, competing interests, absolutely. Everywhere I go, um, I hear and feel the same things. So feel free to keep adding. Just for time's sake, I want to make sure we keep moving. Wait, I saw something that jumped out at me here. Constant interruption. Oh my gosh. Amen to that. That has been my biggest learning experience coming back into a school. Of one thing that has changed since I had left teaching and come back is the amount of time spent testing. I think I proctor tests, facilitate testing more hours of the school year than I've taught this year, for sure. Absolutely. Inconsistency, staffing, scheduling, lack of training. Well, we can certainly help you with the lack of training part. We really want to work with everyone on that scripted curriculum. Too many things. Absolutely. All right. So I hope as you scroll through the chat and read some of the comments that you feel validated, that you're probably sharing a lot of the same concerns, right? So good news, bad news. Good news is you're in good company with people who understand where you're coming from. The bad news is that everybody is having these challenges. And so one thing I want to do this evening is share a great resource with you. And I'll share the link to this in a little bit. But as a teacher, I know that if I share a link with you now, then you are exploring that link and not paying attention to the content, right? Human nature. So I'm not going to share that link until towards the end. But I have for you an English language development standards alignment guide. So what we did in trying to make planning a little bit more streamlined is go through the WIDA standards, the ELPA standard, the different standards from the different states, and find those consistencies across grade levels and try to boil it down to where you can look at one page for a grade level and have kind of a menu of language that they're expected to be able to use and learn in that grade. And so it has K through 12 and the different language features and functions that are expected at that grade level to give you a quick planning tool. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I will share that link with you in just a bit. All right, so I know this is familiar because you've already told me, right? One thing that is happening in a lot of states is that we're implementing new curriculum based on different laws that are being passed governing education, state laws, state guidelines, where the products that districts are buying are very scripted. And when you have scripted programs, right, it targets down the middle, right? No matter what script you're reading, you're not going to capture all students. Like that would be an extremely difficult script to come by that captures all of the students. And I do feel like our multilingual learners, our English learners, are often that audience that is not really accounted for in most of the scripted curriculums. A lot of them have an English language development supplement, things like that, but it's still, we're always having that conflict of having enough support for that content area, right? Which leaves you trying to fill the gaps with not enough time to plan with your content teachers to understand what the curriculum is requiring to learn the different grade levels. And so I do feel like we're aligned in this. You're saying the same thing in the chat that I have here on the slides, that time. One thing that I hear from schools, or mostly why I get called to go to schools to coach or work or consult, is the data, right? The data is saying that our students aren't being successful in all of those many, many, many assessments that they're being given. And it's not a surprise because the assessments are written for native English speakers. So, surprise, our students aren't doing as well as the native English speakers. We know that without the data. But there is a lot of pressure on school principals, on district leaders, and on you in the classrooms and in the specialist programs to do something about it. Right. So that's a lot of stress and a lot of looking at that, especially now as we're going into the season for more assessments, English language development assessments, and will we meet the target? And I'm doing a lot of coaching and consulting, and I actually teach in Maryland schools. And so I know some of you are from Maryland, and yeah, there's a lot of pressure with the Maryland report card. How many points? How many of the 10 points are we getting for our ELD program this year? And so there's pressure. And you just want to feel respected and valued and excited and planned so that you can go home and spend time the way you want instead of worrying about planning and replanning, and just spending all night trying to figure out your school day. So this topic for the webinar, the items that we're going to go through started to come about when I was in my last school position. I was the district coordinator for English language development in a Maryland system. And it was my responsibility to supervise all of the ELD teachers in the district, to write the curriculum, to support the different content areas. And I know in my 6 years in that position, the district adopted 3 different reading language arts curriculum products. 2 years with this one, changed our mind, got another one, 2 years with that one. And of course, each time the ELD department was asked to realign our curriculum with the content area curriculum. And it's a lot of work. That is a lot of work to do K through 12. And so that bottom picture is kind of like what our office looked like during those 6 years of like, here we go again. And so the more this happened and the more I heard about it happening in other places, I started doing my research to say there's got to be a better way. Right. There's got to be a better way so that when one department makes a change, it doesn't cause this giant ripple effect that turns ELD upside down and we have to start all over again. Right. And we need to find a way to be more proactive and not reactive to all the decisions that everyone else is making in the different content areas. And with that, I started doing some research and talking to experts and going to conferences. And this is what I discovered. Functional language planning was my discovery. And I just dove in full force into learning as much as I could because I was at a conference with a presentation by Dr. Ruslana Westerlin, who's one of the authors of the 2020 ELD standards, and happens to be extremely approachable and friendly and amazingly smart. And so at that conference, I, stayed and chatted with her about the challenges we were having and how can I take the ideas she shared and turn that into something systematic, right? Something that we could do instead of constantly changing curriculum and all of that. And so we started into this research and study with her mentorship. So I'm giving her lots of credit here. And this is the conversation we had, that traditionally ELD programs are based on psycholinguistic research. So the idea of curriculum and a scope and sequence and that kind of learning is based on the idea that the brain learns things in a specific order, and this is the order that makes sense. And so this is the order that we're going to teach language. And when we're trying to align it with curriculum, it doesn't always line up. As one of you said, it very often doesn't line up. because our psycholinguistic research says right now we teach, past tense, but in the classroom they're doing something completely opposite. And so we're in constant conflict of feeling like we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, or we're not doing the right thing. And so what Dr. Westerlund challenged me to do was to look at a more sociolinguistic approach to curriculum and language development and instruction, where we weren't so tied into the order in which students needed to learn the different pieces of language, that the curriculum wasn't so tight and scripted and scope and sequenced out and so inflexible, that a sociolinguistic approach would be a much more flexible approach and still very effective way to teach language. And so we spent a good amount of time talking about how that plays out. So the real quick overview, really, really, really boiled down version of the research, just to give you the highlights, is the research into systemic functional linguistics, right? This is a socio-linguistic kind of approach. Systemic functional linguistics, functional being the key word there, right? Systemic should make us feel better because it isn't random, it isn't hit or miss, that there is a systemic way you can approach language instruction, language acquisition, but looking at it from a functional approach rather than a scope and sequence approach. Right? So this resource, the alignment guide I'm going to share with you, is a key tool in a functional approach, because what I'm focusing on in a functional linguistics approach is teaching the language students need to make meaning and to communicate ideas. I can do that in any context, which is the wonderful thing about teaching language. So if the reading language arts department changes curriculum 3 times in 6 years, it's okay. Well, it's not okay for other reasons, but it's not going to rock my world, because I am looking at a menu of language that students need, and I can pick the right piece at the right time to align with what's going on in the classroom and be supportive of the classroom. I can feel like I'm supporting. I can feel like I'm part of the team. I can bring something to the table. And I'm not worried about whether I'm in week 1 or week 10 and am I on pace, right? It's more of, what do my students need? And that's the language that I'm teaching. Now, some of the challenge with that in the beginning when we were working through this was, makes sense, makes total sense, but how do you make that systematic, and how do you then make it systemic? And how do I know if I'm not saying day 1, day 2, day 3? How do you monitor that? How do you, keep track of all the things you're teaching? And those are some of the challenges that do come up. So here are my suggestions if you're in a situation where you are trying really hard to align your English language development instruction with what's going on in the classroom. It can work with math, science, social studies, right? And once you get comfortable with the approach, then, what I always say is, you can throw anything at me. Just give me a topic and give me a couple pieces of information, and I can plan some great language lessons based on very little information, which is the key because we have so little planning time, especially with our content area teachers, that we can do great planning in a little bit of time with a little bit of information. And that is one of the really attractive things about this functional approach. So the first piece is that you will focus on language functions and features, right? That's your whole life, is knowing your language functions and features and being able to recognize them when they present themselves, being able to communicate them to the teachers with whom you work, and get everybody on the same page. So when you sit down to plan in a functional language planning approach, you really just need a few minutes to look at the assessments the students are going to take, look at the assignments they're going to have, look at a couple of the texts, mentor texts. So I don't have to know every unit of every grade level curriculum for the school where I teach. Right now, I'm teaching second and fourth, and I don't need to know all the ins and outs of their language arts curriculum to support them. What I say is, let me see the unit assessment. I can see what kinds of questions they're asking. Are they comparing? Is it an opinion? Do they want citing evidence? What will they be looking for? What writing are you going to ask of students? And do you have a sample? Let me see the text you're going to be reading. What's most important that they get from this? Like, what standard are you getting to? And from that, I can then go to my language alignment guide that I'm going to share with you, and I can pick out the pieces that match what I have seen in those classroom expectations. So let's say, in this unit of math where they're talking about fractions, they're going to be comparing fractions. Then quick and simple, I can look at that alignment guide. What language do they need to compare? And that's my goal in my teaching. It doesn't matter if I'm on week 1, week 5, week 52. I am looking at what they need to compare fractions. If I'm seeing them during language arts and that's my focus, I know they're going to be comparing two characters, talking about their character traits, and then citing evidence from the text to say why you selected this character trait to describe this character. Perfect, right? We need some adjectives. We need compare and contrast language. We need to know how to write when we cite evidence, right? What are those sentence starters? What are those transitions that show that we're citing evidence from the text? And there you go. That is my unit plan for the language side. Now, the trick is you really do have to keep track of making sure with that alignment guide that over time you're covering the different language features and functions. And sometimes it may take a little tweaking to make it fit, to make sure you get to all of them. But you'll be circling through and cycling through and repeating them over and over throughout the year. So you just want to keep going back to that guide and saying, what could I touch on that I haven't touched on, to make sure you're really covering what would have been in a scope and sequence. One thing that I see a lot of, or that I'm called and asked to help with, is the idea of tier 1 instruction versus intervention. And so I'm sure that you have students who are in that spot where, is it language? Is it something else? They've been in intervention for 3 years and the data is still red. We all know those situations. And so this picture kind of reminded me of what happens in most schools, is that if you think of this little tree as the student, and the person holding the watering can right now is the content teacher. And the content teacher is giving that student the language arts curriculum and teaching all the literacy things and giving that student that dose of learning. Now, for many, that's enough, and they grow with that water. Others are a little slower at picking it up, or struggling to pick it up, or not, keeping pace with what is expected with the other curriculums. And we want to start moving children toward intervention. And a lot of what happens is we just pass that same watering can to the person with the hole in the knee of jeans. Let's say that's our ELD teacher. And we're like, ELD teacher, they're not getting it, so I'm going to give you the watering can of phonemic awareness, fly, sounds and letters, and you're going to do more of that. And so you're putting more of the same water. And then they pass it to the other person. Everybody has holes in their jeans in this picture. I just noticed this right now. The person on the right, and maybe that's the reading teacher. And so the reading teacher is also going to take them and do a lot of the same. And so what I see when I go to schools is that we have multiple specialists, multiple adults giving more and more and more of the same thing, more and more water, more and more water. And more of the same thing isn't always going to be your answer, because if they didn't get it that way from the first adult, more of the same isn't necessarily going to do it. So what we need is more of this kind of approach, and what we coach schools to do, where each person has a specialty and is bringing that specialty to the table. So as the English language development teacher, I am not going to teach the same thing that my content teacher is teaching. I am, in a roundabout kind of way. So what this would look like is they have their regular classroom instruction. So let's say the second graders that I work with, they have their curriculum. They're working with the teacher. They do have their small group instruction. And we have a group that's struggling with that information, or struggling to get started in their literacy. And so if I'm asked by the teacher, can you take this and keep working on this? Or can you take this worksheet and finish with them because it's too hard and they need help? Right? If we're doing more of the same that wasn't working, it's going to keep not working. And that's why we have students in intervention for 3 years. So what I challenge you to think of is that each person has a specialty. Each person was hired for their specialty and for their expertise. And we need to make sure that each person is able to use that. And so the foundation, the English language development teacher needs to provide English language development, because language is the basis for literacy. Oral language is the basis for your literacy skills. And if you have low oral language skills and scores in English, you will continue to struggle. Right. So our first, if we're looking at this in a medical way, the first diagnosis is, right, you aren't going to grow in your literacy until you have some rock solid oral language skills going. So ELD teacher, cue you. That's your spot. You're getting that oral language development going so that the classroom teacher can build on it with the language arts curriculum. And then we have different approaches where we can work on the same skills. As the ELD teacher, I teach teachers a method called hold apart, or if you use picture induction word model, things like that, where we can work in the same skills that the content teacher's doing. We're just coming about it from a language point of view, where we start with language and end with literacy, where the classroom teacher is focused straight in on the literacy. And so we have to have an English language development program that is based on English language development standards. And that's where that alignment guide helps too, to go to a principal or to a reading teacher and say, this is my job. Language functions, language features. That's my job. And I will work all the phonemic awareness and sounds and strategies and all that in as best I can. But this is priority one. The schools that have the most red data in literacy are schools that have turned the English language development teacher into a classroom content area curriculum support and not an English language development teacher. Right? And it happens because people do the best they can with what they know. And if you don't know any other way, then you're going to keep doing the same thing. And what we know is that if we turn our ELD teachers into paraeducators or classroom support positions, or everyone focused on content area curriculum and content area curriculum only, we are going to continue to see the same problems. There has to be a systematic language development program going on in order to move them quickly where they need to be. And so I hope that some of the tool I'm going to share with you will help you be able to present that. And there's tons of research around the idea that language development is a critical part of literacy development. And even in the science of reading research, we get away from linguistic research, get into that science of reading research that all the programs are using and quoting. And language development is a piece of that research, but it has become really minimized by publishers who are creating products to sell. And so we need to bring that language development to the forefront for our students in order for the rest of the pieces to fall into place. How do we do that? Right. What we want to do is avoid that hamster on the wheel, right? We can't keep doing the same thing, doing the same thing. Oh, they're still not moving. The data's still red. Oh, go to intervention. Now we're in third grade and we're on the third year of intervention and we still have red data. We need to break that cycle. And in systemic functional linguistics, one piece of the research that's very well documented and tested a lot in Australia, seems to be willing to do cutting edge things in education, is the teaching and learning cycle. And so consistently taking your language standards, your features and functions, and planning your lessons to follow this teaching and learning cycle, will you will see progress. I have no doubt in my mind. I would give you a money back guarantee, but it's a free webinar. I guarantee you will see progress. So real quick review of it because we can go in a lot of depth here. But planning with the end in mind, like I said, take a peek at the assessments, talk to the teachers. What is your goal? What are they going to do? What are they going to write? And in your mind, you know your language features and functions. You look at your guide, got it, right? You know quickly where you need to go to support the students to be able to do what the teacher is asking them. We do our oral language development around the topic, so we're spending time talking. This is what we don't give students enough time to do in our scripted curriculum. They need to do this in English language development time. Building knowledge around the topic, speaking about the topic, using that vocabulary, hearing the ideas, getting that language flowing and going. Right? Then we move into deconstructing text with a language lens. Maybe it's a text we're reading. If we're doing a read aloud and there's a lot of descriptive language, maybe we're going to go there. If there's a certain verb tense that's used a lot, maybe we'll go there. There's always more choices than you'll ever have time to do when you look at things through the language lens. So looking at either a text they're going to read or something you're going to read, or, and finding those language points that will help them understand that better. Then we're talking about that with the students. Did you notice like all these descriptive words that the author used? Or did you notice all of these sentences that mean they're comparing, right? Or all of these conjunctions or all of these transitions, whatever it might be, that show what time of day it is or show how much time has gone by. You're helping them notice these things. Then we move into step 4, joint construction, where this is where our literacy starts to come in. So far, we've been doing a lot of talking about the text and talking about what we're working on, the reading and the writing. And we start doing joint construction where we work with the students to create our own text now about the topic. Depending on the age of your students, depending on their literacy level, this looks different. It might be very guided where you are doing 90% of the work with their ideas. And then the more proficient they are, or the higher the literacy level, the more that load they can take on and maybe do as partners instead of teacher-led. Lots of choices there. Then they move into taking the model you've been doing together and doing more independent work. We move to review and assess again, like we always do. How'd that go? What did they get? What are they still missing? Gives you a new teaching point based on what you see, and then you move on. There's a lot of this built in to language arts curriculum now. I see once you get to know the flow and the pattern, you'll see when it shows up in a lesson sequence. But this should be the ELD teacher You can be on topic. You can talk about the same things. You can use text that they're doing in class. You might just use a snippet of it, or one out of 5 different ones. You can align it very easily, but you are starting oral language focus, developing the oral language, moving into co-created text, reading and writing together, and then moving into that independent use. This way of literacy development is that functional way. And we call it whole to part because in traditional curriculum, we learn the letters, then the sounds, then we have CVC words, then we start adding in, getting more and more complex. So we start with the little pieces and we build up. What works better for most English learners is that we flip that. And we start with the big picture, the whole, the meaning making. We start with the message, and we take a message that we understand, that we helped create, and then we break it down and say, oh, did you notice that, this first, letter sound, you can break it down into the pieces and do your cut up sentences and cut off the first sound of each word and put it back together. Once they have the communication piece, then they can break it down into those little parts and it means more to them and it sticks better, right? So just flipping it around the other way. And that's what I do with students before we talk about any kind of intervention. And it makes that most of them don't need a traditional intervention that was written for an English speaker, because we are doing the language first and then adding on the skills. When we get into our upper levels, most of us start thinking like once they get to about an intermediate level, we're trying to move them to exit the program, and we run out of ideas. We don't know exactly what to teach them. They need to write better. They need to have better flow. They need to have more detail. They need better structure, but we don't really know how to teach that or what that looks like or what kind of feedback to give. And this is one where Dr. Westerland, and I'm still working with her to this day on learning more about cohesion. And you've probably seen emails from me about her presenting about teaching cohesion. But the different cohesive devices and pieces of teaching cohesion when it comes to that higher level of writing, it just makes it so much easier to be very specific and very targeted. Right. So, for example, in the cohesive devices, we talk about that pronoun matching, or when you say Bob and Sarah went to the store, they had a shopping list, and helping students follow that. Or if your students are my students were writing something about sardines, and sardines are smelly, but they're healthy. Sardines have vitamin E. Sardines have minerals. Sardines have good fats. Sardines have, right? And then teaching them how to replace and do that. How do you replace that? How do you make that connection throughout your text? Learning more about teaching cohesion is something that will helps move them, right? How to move them. Your noun groups, how do you move them? How do you do the different connectors, the transitions, etc. So becoming more of an expert on cohesion, cohesive devices will really help those upper level students. I'm just taking a second to check the chat box. Overwhelming number of students who are pre-literate. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when it really isn't that difficult to flip the script and try something else. It's just getting people to trust that the language development has to happen, right? To make that a priority, you make that a priority and you see things change really quickly. All right, so everyone needs to become a functional language planning expert because then you can plan for any situation that comes your way. Um, Focusing in on those features and functions, right? That's our goal. Another tool that we're working on developing is a quick planning guide where, and you can do this yourself. I just have a Google form that I share with teachers, and I say, what are we working on over the next few weeks? What's something you're asking them to write? Here's a list of language functions. Can you circle three that you know they're going to compare, they're going to contrast, they're going to describe, they're going like just pick out a couple, tell me what kind of writing you want them to do, and I have enough to go with, right? A simple Google form, they answer like 3 questions. If you have a sample, great, and then I can do the rest. And then I can share with them also what they can be doing for the language as well. Makes planning a lot quicker when you have a system like that and the teachers you work with know. It gets faster and faster, right, as you develop their expertise as well. So you can go through and say, here's my shopping list in the language alignment guide. We're going to do this, this, and this. And you can look at the text, look at the assessment, and you have everything you need. And it's not flying by the seat of your pants. But once you get really good at noticing those things, then you really could walk into any situation and get a plan in your head. But I don't encourage not planning ahead. But you can be more flexible and feel like you're still doing your job when someone throws a curveball at you and be like, oh, never mind. We're going to skip unit 3 and move on to unit 4. And you've spent hours and hours and hours planning unit 3, right? So you can be very flexible and quick and still chew your food, go to the bathroom and do those things. And watch your students and yourself feel more successful and feel in control there. All right, so the language alignment guide. Now it is time. I'm going to cross my fingers that this link works for you. It's a Google Doc. You have viewing rights there. If you wanted to do a save as and you wanted to play with it, then that's fine too. It's based on all the different language development standards that we could get our hands on and try to pull pieces. So what you're going to do is look at a particular grade level. There's tabs along the bottom where you can pick your grade level and look at your menu of choices. And when you look at what they're doing in the classroom, again, remember, take a quick look at the assessment questions. What are they asking students to do by the end of this unit? Take a quick look at what the writing expectations are. And then you're going to back map. Okay, they're going to have to answer character trait question and cite evidence in the text, right? That gives me plenty of lessons to do in English language development. And so I'm going to my language alignment guide. I'm looking at 2nd grade and where are my language features and functions that match that. And that's what's going in my plan for my principal. And it is aligned to the standards. So you're good there. And you will be building forward. Now, getting into that teaching and learning cycle from there would be the next step. The alignment guide gives you your language objectives and your standard alignment. And then the teaching and learning cycle takes you through the step-by-step, day-to-day in your classroom lessons. Okay. What questions do you have before I talk more about functional language planning? Questions, comments? I know it's a brush, high level brush over and not deep into the details of anything. But let me know if you need something clarified. And so I'll keep an eye on the chat if you have any questions or clarifications needed. But for time's sake, I want to make sure I tell you about this opportunity. It is something that you can do a lot with just the alignment tool that you have and the idea of putting language development on the front burner and knowing that it's the foundation for everything that they need before they can tackle that curriculum or before that curriculum's going to stick. It has to have something to stick to. So you're providing that foundation that you can get started with right away. To get deeper into learning about the teaching and learning cycle and the cohesive devices and digging a little deeper into what that looks like in a lesson plan day by day, we offer the Functional Language Planning Expert Intensive. It's a 12-week program. It's facilitated by me and by Dr. Westerlin, which is amazing that we have her to guide us. And she teaches two sessions on teaching with cohesion, finding language in read alouds, teaching noun groups. So she's very specific in what you're looking for language alignment wise. She's more the technical person of the two of us. And then I'm more of the making it work in the classroom. So she's the what do I teach, and I'm the how do I teach. So that's our combination there. So we have a new one starting on February 4th through April 30th. In this language intensive, one of the best parts to me are the live sessions. We have about every other week, every 2 weeks or so, a live session where we all come together and collaborate. And it's like this, people from across the country. So it's really fun to plan with people who have different kinds of programs and we're all experiencing the same thing. So we have live sessions that we do together. There's asynchronous content that you go through at your own pace and when you want. It's equals about 2 hours a week of a commitment to get through everything. And there are assignments in there if you need a certificate or a credit or something like that to take back if a district's paying for it. If you're doing it just for you, then you can choose to do the assignments or not do the assignments. That's really up to you. But the assignments are the application, so it makes sense. My favorite part beyond the live sessions with Dr. Westerlin is that you get one-on-one coaching sessions. So you decide what you want to be coached on. You decide what you want to talk about. You go to my calendar link, you grab a slot, and we have a one-on-one conversation where I help you in your specific situation know how to implement what you're learning. Different people have used those coaching sessions for different approaches. I've worked with one of the participants and she made all of her coaching sessions be about how to support other teachers and sharing this information out with other teachers. I have, Louisa, good question, right? Is it for ELD teachers or classroom teachers? Both. I think all classroom teachers should develop their language expertise as well. With the classroom teacher, we talked about what small group instruction could look like when you're taking a language approach. That the small group instruction that isn't so tightly controlled by the scripted curriculum, or where are the opportunities? How can I build more language into math? Things like that. We've coached on one group that I'm particularly proud of, a school that had 5 or 6 teachers from that school join the cohort together. And they created an alternative to moving students into intervention, that before we talk about intervention, we are going to have, they're using the hold apart methods and the teaching and learning cycle, and the students have to be in that type of instructional group, small group, for an amount of time before we even talk about intervention. And they're making great progress. And I'd be happy to share their case study with you if you want to send me an email and say you'd like to see the case studies from the schools who are doing that. I'd be happy to share that. We now have a third school who has started in on that as well, as a real plan in their school improvement plan for language development as an extension of tier 1 instruction before we get to intervention. So your coaching could be anything you decide you want it to be. right? I had one person where all of our coaching was helping her perfect her message so that she could go to her principal and be believable and confident in telling the principal what she wanted to do with the program, right? It could be whatever you want. And I love those sessions. Um, we say 3 coaching sessions included, but in all honesty, I get so much out of having those conversations, and it helps me know how to message better and makes me think of how to solve and gives me more experience in that as well. And so as long as it fits on my calendar, it's usually yes. And so you get that individual support. All right, so that starts in February when I send you, be on the lookout tomorrow for an email with the replay of this session tonight. And in that email, I'll put the links to where you can sign up, where you can enroll. If you want to check into it before that, just go to our website. Let me put the link here. Sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. It never turns out well. EnglishLearnerPortal.com. And up in the menu under professional development, you'll see functional language planning expert intensive. Click there, you get the schedule, when the live sessions happen, more information about the program and links to register if you want to go there. But I'll also include all that in our follow-up email. All right. I have been talking a lot, so I am here to answer questions, any questions you have about the language development ideas, any questions you have about the program. Someone had asked a question. How do you do this with level 1, 2? The whole to part with level 1, 2, that's like my happy place. So the whole to part process, you start with that oral language development, and that's exactly what level 1 and 2 need, right? We're doing a lot of talking. The teachers that I said were doing these groups as a pre-intervention, they pull images from the curriculum. So the 2nd grade curriculum, 3rd grade curriculum, and the vocabulary that they need for that unit as well. And they do a lot of oral language development first for the first lesson or 2. Then we move into taking that and helping students to use sentences, complete sentences when they're talking about the topic and the picture. And then we move into helping them expand their sentences we put their sentences in writing and they practice reading them. Students can read so much more when you put their ideas on the page, right? It's that meaning making. You can put a written text in front of them and they struggle, struggle, struggle. But when we write it together, they read beautifully. And it's really fun to watch. And so then they are reading what you wrote together, that co-created text. Now they're reading that co-created text, and then you break it up and talk about the skills from there. So definitely works really well with grade 1 and 2. And I have some videos and things like that. If you were interested in any of that, you can send me an email. I can share a little bit more of that. All right. Any questions that I can answer for you? We have a couple minutes left. Now that I am stopping to look, I see my former coworker on here, Miss Smith. Hi. It's good to see your face. Uh,
Hi,
just
Cal. How are you? Nice
good.
to see you.
Totally off topic, but the other day I pulled a jacket out of the closet, and when I put my hands in the pockets, I pulled out my Queen Anne's High School gloves that were in my pocket, and I thought of you.
Oh, that's awesome. I think of you often, and I think this was very informative and helpful. And I'm so glad I remembered to get on and zoom in because I loved working with you.
Yeah, I miss you guys. All right, it's good to see your face. All right, if I can answer any questions for you, just let me know. Feel free to email me. Again, tomorrow I'll send a link to the recording. I will put the link to the language alignment guide in there too, so you can find it later. And then also put the link to get more information about the expert intensive program if you're interested. If you need any documentation to ask for a district to pay, just let me know. I'd be happy to help you with that. I know in some districts, teachers have used tuition reimbursement. We can do that if you need to go that route. Just talk to us and we'll help you out. All right. Thank you and enjoy. I am putting together some more topics based on things that I'm learning through this school year and relearning. And so we'll have some more webinars coming up in the spring. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you have a great evening and rest of your week and weekend, and you'll be hearing from me soon.
Can you stay on for a second, Kelly?
Sure.